Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. Um, and yeah, if you haven't noticed yet, the sound quality is hopefully a lot better. It's because I got this thing right here. I got a new microphone, so now you can hear me. Um, but other than that, I'm really excited to make this video. I haven't made one of these analyzation videos of my Anti-Chess World Cup 2020 in a while, and I feel like these videos are getting more intense for sure. For one, I still feel like my game is improving monumentally by week, and so I feel like my analyzation of these games now is a lot better than when I'd first started doing these videos. Like I think me now compared to me 2 months ago, like when I was playing these games, I feel like I'm a very different player, and so I think I'm giving better ideas and better sort of annotations and analyzations of these games now. And other than that, also because I'm advancing further and I'm winning games in this tournament, my opponents keep getting stronger and stronger, and so the games keep getting more intense and more intense. And with that being said, I literally have nothing to lose because if I'm not. Oh wait, no, I had a draw versus Ultimate Super Player, but this is also a 10-game series, so I do not have any time to waste. Another thing that you should know before before I go into this match is I'm playing ACWC. So I want to give shoutouts to ACWC and Kex for his study, and ACWC for this match. And one thing you should know about this before too is ACWC is sort of the player that helped me become a lot stronger when I was first really getting into the game. And whenever people ask, I always say he probably took me. I always have a different idea between strength and actual rating, but I think ACWC legitimately took me from 1900 strength to close to 2100, and so a lot of my advancement in the game wouldn't have been done without him. And I think that playing this match, as soon as I found out I was matched up against him, it was sort of like it was sort of something like I didn't want to be like, haha, I'm really good. Like I didn't want to try to be like that at all, but I wanted to sort of show him all the progress that I've made after him teaching me. So it's sort of like, hey, you've done so well with teaching me. I really want to show you what I've got now. So just in sort of a playful, fun way, and sort of I really want to thank you. So I really want to show you that you've done a really good job with teaching me. So I had a lot on this line for sure, a lot on the line here. And in addition to this, I'd sort of calculated, because there's only 2 more rounds left before the elimination and the pool play, and I really wanted to make it on to the candidates round. That was sort of my goal for this tournament. And I knew that of these last 2 games, they're both going to be incredibly difficult. If ACWC, this matchup was probably going to be my slightly or easier matchup, and that sounds ridiculous to say because ACWC in my mind is a top 10 player. And so I knew I had to win one of those 2 games to make it to the elimination round, in which I'd just have a 1v1 game, and I'd have to win that to move on to the candidates round. Whereas if I win both of the games, then I move on to the finals. So and if I win neither of them, then I don't even make it into the elimination round. So this was certainly an important game for me, in a multitude of ways. And so let's just get right into it. For this match, I'm not gonna lie, I prepped a lot, but as you'll see soon, one thing that ACWC was really good at is knowing that I'd prep a lot, and like when I played these other opponents, they sort of just stayed with their normal lines, and it made it like much easier for me, because if I knew what lines they were gonna play, then I could study the correct ones. But ACWC, as you'll even see in this first game, just completely threw me off my game by playing some really strange, not bad, but just really strange moves. And so it really tripped me up really early, and you'll see why ACWC is such a good player in a moment. But let's just start out. ACWC goes out with e3, and I have prepped b6. I didn't feel comfortable with b6 at this time, but I had seen a couple games where ACWC, I'm pretty sure I'd played Grohacek Grom b6, and played a couple of funky moves, and so I thought I'd be able to take advantage of it. But right off the bat, does not go for bishop a6 or bishop b5 or a4 or anything like that. He completely throws me off and just goes for bishop c4. And so I have no idea what to do already. I've never really played this line, and I think it's smart by him knowing that I hadn't played this line very much, because I didn't really give myself a great position, but it just sort of became a completely theoretical game. So I went for c5, which I don't see as a bad sort of theoretical move, grabbing space, opening up for your queen, but okay, captures, and now AutumnWND throws me further off my prep and plays b3. So at this point I'm thinking, oh, I want to do some sacrifices, but I also like my pawns here, like they're in really nice places, I can develop, and they just sort of control the board. So I really didn't know what to do, so I was like, okay, I guess I'll sort of like give away these pieces. So I give away both those, and then I go for queen a5, which is actually, computer states as a blunder, but I don't know, I don't see it as anything terrible. Maybe I can play bishop a6, gain control of this close to the center of the board with my knight, but okay. And AutumnWND goes for queen h5, probably trying to attack my king if I let him. But I capture on a2, and after the rook recaptures, I play g6 immediately. Just, I do not want to let this happen. But this sort of gives AutumnWND a nice position. So we have queen takes on h7, rook recaptures, and after both of these captures with the rook, he goes for g4, which is shown as a blunder once again by the computer analysis. But that's for a couple of interesting reasons, as we'll see in a second. So rook takes h2, rook takes h2. And I now go for bishop to a6, and after bishop a6, we see the capture, and I recapture with the rook, just keeping my rook on the open file. And now we see both of these moves again, giving up the bishop and ending up with the knight on this file. So AutumnWND has a really nice position, and other than that, actually is really far up, because what I end up playing is knight h6, which basically just gives away both my knight and my bishop. For basically no reason at all, and it puts him in a really good position. The correct move here, which I would never play even knowing it's the correct move at this point, is king g7, which basically just gives up your king after a couple moves. So I never really liked it, but that's what the computer thinks. So that's why knight h6 is seen as a blunder. But okay, rook captures, and after my bishop captures, we see both knight e2, and then after I recapture, or not recapture, if I'm just capturing on e3, and then f takes. A lot of people sort of wonder in these positions, should I take with the f pawn or the e pawn? And my general rule of thumb, and this isn't always, but my general rule of thumb is you want to capture towards where your other pieces are, just because it's your pieces are much stronger when they are closer together, rather than when they are spread apart. And eventually, if you have to promote, king promotion is much safer if the pieces are spread apart, because there's no way to connect them all. Whereas capturing with the f pawn, like AutumnWND does here, is perfectly fine. So I just play knight c6, and I play this pretty quickly because AutumnWND's at 30 seconds, and I'm still at about a minute 20. So I just see this as an okay move. I see it as fairly drawish. But AutumnWND goes for knight b5, which I actually really like, because it puts a threat right here, and the knight's also controlling so much of the board. I'm not doing very much in this sort of corner of the board. And okay, I play knight d4, and AutumnWND captures with the e knight, and now the knights are both terrorizing me. But in this case, I just play e6, and after the knight captures, my king can recapture, and I sort of have a lot of space on the board. We see knight a7. I play king d6, just trying to get rid of this knight, and we now see g5. I now play king c7, thinking, oh, okay, this wins the game for me if the knight isn't moved. But knight c6, so I recapture with the king. I like keeping my pawn on the 7th rank, so then I always have the option to push 2 spaces ahead. But now AutumnWND marches king into the game, king f2, king d6, king g3, and I play king to e7, just centralizing my king. And now we have queen h4, and this is a critical moment because I actually have a mate here, but I end up missing it. So if you want to pause the video, now is a good time to try to find the mate. And if you did, good job. It's basically just you wanna give up the king and the pawn, because now after I advance d5, white has to give away both of these 2 pawns, and there's nothing stopping this rook promotion right here. So that's the idea. However, I don't give away the king. I keep my king for now at a mere 28 seconds, and I just go for d5. I'm thinking maybe I go for the rook promotion immediately. but this does not work anymore, as you'll see after c4 takes and d3 takes. We now have king to g3, and now the king's going to be able to make it back in time. So I play king d7, we have king f2, and after king c6, king f1, both players, or AutumnWND and I, agreed to a draw, both thinking neither of us are going to move our pawns, and we're just going to keep our kings in the exact same places. So that reminds me, I forgot, I have to change the score. I forgot about these videos. The score is changed there, and right here the score should also be changed, 0.5 to 0.5. Excellent. We are now moving on to game 2, so it is half to a half, and a game to 5.5. And so now in this game, I open up with b3, and AutumnWND goes for b6. So, and at this point, I'm sort of like, it doesn't matter what I play. He's just going to throw me off with something. So I'm going to try throwing him off with something with an opening I used to play a lot, and I just go for knight e2, which is just a practical move. I know if many of you know Ogle1, incredible player. He loves this knight e2 move, not necessarily in this opening, but in openings similar to this, like when c5 is played. So it's not a bad move, but we now have g5, just grabbing space, and I just go for b3, just preparing to develop pieces, and we now have knight b4. I was actually looking at the next move, which is what I played, g3. And okay, so knight captures, rook captures, and we now have bishop to g7, which is actually a nice move. It threatens a lot of nasty things right here. Like, I wouldn't want my pawns to be doubled in any of these places, and I obviously don't want to have to recapture with the bishop there. So rook takes on a7, rook recaptures, and I have to give up the bishop here. And other than that, there's not a ton I can do, so I just go for knight a3, but now the rook can capture on a3. If the bishop captured, obviously there might be some trouble, but no longer any trouble, and I go for queen b1 after thinking a while. And so, okay, rook takes on b3, queen takes here. Obviously you can't capture here with the rook, so the rook captures on a3, and queen captures on h8. We now have rook captures on g3, queen captures on g8, and AutumnWND's got plenty of different moves here, but decides to go for this rook g2 move, just threatening even more. Could have recaptured here, but I guess he figured he's already going to lose the king. Why not threaten this, and maybe open my rook up on the h file in the 7th rank. But after this, what did I do? Oh yeah, I just captured the king, and after queen captures, this rook is still threatening both of these pawns, but this actually looks really good for me now after rook f1, because after rook takes, king takes, my rook is free on the back rank, and my knight will be free to move soon. As soon as my rook goes to h1 or d1 or c1 or something like that, then my king can move too. Meanwhile, black has a lot of pawns on the back rank, a queen and a bishop that are both stuck behind pawns, so there's not much to do. And AutumnWND goes for f5, and now here's a position where there's a mate in 6, and I actually find it. I really suggest that if you like trying different puzzles and stuff, to try to find this mate here. I had 30 seconds left. I don't know how much time I spent on this move. I'll be able to tell you in a second. But the idea here is just to try to mobilize pieces maybe, but this loses, so pause the video. And once you've come back, you will recognize that the move is knight to f4. And that's not really the reason why. The reason why is after g takes f4, you now have king g3, and this is just beautiful. It's sort of an intermediate, a discovered intermediate, because the rook now opens up on this file. So after the pawn captures here, I can capture on f5, and the pawn still has one more piece to capture. And here I just play rook to f7, queen takes, and after c4, queen takes, I play d3, and I am now up 1.5 to a half. And I'll just input that now. Oh, that did not work. Okay, there we go. So yeah, moving on to game 3 now. AutumnWND has the white pieces, so I will flip the board around, just because I like showing my perspective. So we start out with e3 by AutumnWind again, as I was expecting, and I go for b6, and this time we do see bishop a6. I play knight takes, and once again throws me off with the main line, queen h5. I expected him to play some sort of funky thing, and sadly at this moment in time I had no idea what the main line is. You should play c5 here, but I go for knight b4, which is severely winning for white. Thing is, after you take here, I'm pretty sure the capture is supposed to happen like on c2, and it's just a really ugly position for black, but I miss it, and after rook takes h7, as you can see, it's pretty much all over already. After e4, I take on a1, yeah, and then a5 captures, b3. These are all just nice moves for AutumnWind. d3, now I have to capture the bishop down here, so I take on c1, and knight h3 just sort of ruins me, because now I capture an h3, g captures, and after knight takes d3, king d2, knight takes f2, and king e2, I resign the game because there's nothing more to be done here. And so this, if there's anything that's coming from these games, it's me understanding, okay, if I want to play an opening, I can't just, or at least from now on, I got away with it in the past, like I would just play openings I didn't know very well, because I knew my opponents were going to play a certain line. But I figured once I was getting to these super high-level games, like with AutumnWind, if I was going to play an opening, I better know it a decent amount, and I better know some of the main lines, because otherwise that's going to really, really hurt me. And so yeah, that's definitely something I learned from this match. But anyways, it's 1.5 to 1.5 now, and we're moving on to game 4, where I have the white pieces once again, and we see another Liardit. So we're 4 in a row, and this time I go for a4. So we see e6, and I go for bishop a6, not the main line. This is the line that I used to play a lot. So I go b4, bishop takes, and I just go for a5, giving away this pawn. And this just opens up my queen side. It's very nice. I can develop pieces. So we see b takes a5, rook takes a5, bishop takes d2, and king takes d2. And we now have knight back to b8. Oh wait, that's not. We don't see knight back to b8. We see rook to b8. And this is when I was sort of starting to feel comfortable in this game. But as you'll find out, I probably shouldn't have been. Rook takes a6, rook takes b1, and after rook takes e6 and rook takes c1, the reason I thought it was good was because I could play rook captures on e8, and this looks really good for me, at least in my opinion right here. But really, black should capture here, but does not. Instead, yeah, if I'm correct, that's the correct move. But instead captures with the queen, and after queen captures on c1, queen captures here, and f takes e3. In this case, I captured here because that way my queen has some protection. AutumnWind just develops his pieces. Knight e7, queen d1, and knight c6. And now I play queen c1. Just because I don't have a lot of moves to make. I could develop my knight, but then the problem there is I get some threats back here. However, in retrospect, I probably should have played it. We now have rook f8, and now I play knight e2, but it's starting to become a little late because after, oh wait, that's knight d4. I'm making a lot of mistakes here. We have knight to e5, which is just a really strange move. There's not a lot I can do, and I blunder with queen d1. Because now, another crazy move, knight g4, it attacks both of these pieces, and that's really the star move here, because if my king captures, that opens up for my queen, and otherwise, taking here, obviously I'm lost. So I go rook f1 just for any hope at anything, but knight takes e3, king takes e3, and we now have d5. After my queen captures on d5, we have a6, oh, that's h6, oh, jeez, a6, rook takes, and queen takes on f7. We now have c6, queen takes g7, h6, my queen takes again, and AutumnWind accidentally, I think, makes a mistake here with bishop f5. because now I capture on c6, and after bishop captures c2, queen captures c2. So I actually now have the winning position. However, I only have 32 seconds left. We obviously see a5, and I play queen c8, just getting my queen out of the way. a4, and I start advancing this pawn right here. a3, and I play g5, a2, and I blunder with g6. Which allows this bishop promotion right here by AutumnWND, which again, really, really stellar move. So with 11 seconds left, I give up this pawn. I now play queen h8, and after the bishop takes, I go knight c3. And after the capture, I've just sort of got to keep my king away, but I've got 5 seconds left, so I'm not really studying the position too much. I'm just sort of trying to keep my queen away, my king away. But AutumnWND does uses this technique of capturing my king and then sacrificing the pawn. That's sort of what you want to do in this situation. Is you want to capture your opponent's major piece, then you can just sacrifice to that super immobile pawn. But AutumnWND does an exceptional job of not giving me anywhere to go. So bishop g7, I play king f2. We have bishop to h6, again threatening that I go here. King g2, and we now have bishop d2, and I make the blunder here. I should have played king g1. I'm pretty sure it's a draw, but I play h3, and after this, AutumnWND just plays bishop h6, and after queen g1, the super epic move of bishop to f4. And now my only move here is king f1. Obviously, I can't give the king away because after the pawn starts advancing, he just moves his bishop to e5, and then he can sacrifice on g7. But after this, just bishop h6, I go back to g2, and after AutumnWND goes back to d2, it forces me into a corner. I obviously can't go in any of these places, and so I have to go back, and I go to h2. And this is basically when the game is over. He plays bishop c3 first, and I go king h1, and now it's really over after bishop to d4. And so just a really strong endgame because, and I resign this position just because if I move either here or here, obviously I'm going to have to capture the bishop, and otherwise if I give up the king here, and the bishop recaptures, then the bishop all it has to do is come back to here and sacrifice as the pawn moves up the board. And so yeah, really, really complex game. My throat is now sore from just analyzing that one game. But a great game played by AutumnWND. This should be now 2.5 to 1.5. I keep doing that. That's my bad. But okay, I have no time to lose. I've got to keep moving on. So now we play this game again. I have the black pieces once again, so I'm going to flip the board. And this is what really throws me off, because AutumnWND basically every single game plays e3, and I never thought I'd see a day where he plays something different. But he goes for c4. Obviously, seeing my games with Kotov, understanding that I play a6, and after this capture, rook captures, there are certainly ways to take advantage of it. And one way that he takes advantage of it is h4, which the computer says is a blunder, but it's actually really difficult to see why. Rook takes a2, rook takes a2, and g5 I go with immediately. H takes, and I go for knight h6. We have rook takes, bishop takes, g takes, and I make the blunder here with knight to a6. Really, I should be playing c5. Maybe I can get my queen out. However, I make the blunder of knight a6, as you'll see in a second, because after rook takes a6 and bishop takes a6, AutumnWND has this exceptional move of queen c2, because now after my bishop captures, AutumnWND will be able to come down here, and that sets up my rook for 2 captures in a row. And so I have to capture on e2, but AutumnWND makes the mistake here, thinking that capturing on c7 also wins, when in fact it doesn't. However, I also sadly made the mistake thinking this wins for him. So I just start haphazardly moving. Queen takes, bishop takes, and of course my only move again is queen takes c1, and AutumnWind plays d4, and here I make the losing move. This is actually in my puzzle encyclopedia, which is on Lichess. I will put a link in the description for those who are interested. I take on e1 here because I think if there's any way he messes up, I want his king off the board. When in retrospect, queen takes b2 is actually fine. The king cannot undefend this bishop, and the king cannot move away from this bishop. If the bishop moves, then the king defends that pawn, and even something like bishop d3 is completely fine for white, because after queen takes, bishop takes, I just recapture, and after the king recaptures and the rook recaptures, there's no way for white to continue this attack. Sure, white has a decent position, but after I give up 2 pawns, maybe I can push this pawn, and I don't even have to give up the pawns. I can just wait till he pushes, and then maybe do something like this and force a promotion. So I'm actually fine here. However, if we go back to this position, I took on e1. And so now it's just game over, basically. Bishop a6, I take on f2. It doesn't really matter where I'm taking. d5, taking on g2, knight h3, and I take on b2. We now have knight c3, queen takes c3, bishop to b7, just moving pieces. There's nothing else to be done here. a6, queen takes h6, sorry, d6, e takes d6, and I thought that I was fine here. However, AutumnWind finds bishop to d3, and there's nothing I can do here because I've got 2 pieces defending this. So I almost made it out alive, but I've got 2 pieces defending here, and even after f5, like I played, I've still got 2 pieces defending here and a king defending this pawn, so there's nothing I can do. So I played queen h3, bishop takes d7, and queen takes d7. So now AutumnWind is really kicking my butt, and is up 3.5 to 1.5. All AutumnWind needs to do is win 2 more games, and that is the match. Moving on though to game 5. Game 6. Is it game 6? Am I wrong? I hope I didn't mess up there. Yeah, okay. I guess we're moving on to game 6. Does that make sense? Sorry about that. There should be a total of 5 points on the board, and there is. Okay, so we're moving on to game 6, I guess, and I have the white pieces, and I once again go for e3. This is what I prepared. b6, and I go for a4. Once again, we have e6, and I play bishop a6, and after the knight captures and b4, we have bishop takes b4, and I go for a5 once again. B takes, rook takes, bishop takes d2, king takes d2, and once again rook b8. We see the exact same line. I capture on e6, captures on c1, and this time instead of capturing the king, actually, I captured on c1 for some reason, even though I probably could have played better that way. But okay, that's what I did. F takes on e6, and after queen takes d7, we have king takes on d7, and now I just develop my knight. So this is still a nice position for me, but it's also a nice position for him. Knight e7, and I just start getting my king into the game, and AutumnWind develops his knight to c6. I now just move my rook to g1. Maybe I want to threaten something like h4 right here. So yeah, we see knight d4. And after e takes, we see c5. I take again, and we now see even queen b6 by AutumnWind, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I don't know if there's a better move. But I probably wouldn't have given up my pieces, but this is why AutumnWind is leading me 3.5 games to 1.5. Captures, and I go for c4. I just want to grab space. I don't care if I have to capture here, because maybe I can come down, I can force the rook to give up, and maybe I can promote to something nice. But AutumnWind, of course, doesn't do that. He plays rook d8, maybe can open up on some discoveries, maybe something along this fashion. And so I give up the pawn, c5, and now king to c2. I just want to get my king closer to the d-file, so if the king does ever move, I want to be able to force something down here. Because right now, AutumnWind can just recapture here, and something like this, if my rook ever moves, obviously, I can't sacrifice my rook. But anyways, c4 is pushed forward. and I go king to d3. Um, and now AutumnWind's got several captures in a row here. And that's why that c4 was an inaccuracy. I can take a couple times and put my rook here on this rank. C takes, and I've actually had to study this position a couple of times because I want to know, hey, if there's a pawn on this square and I've got 3 pawns next to me, is that completely winning? Which it is, yes. So instead of like setting my rook up for an extra move, I know that this is winning if I play rook a1 and then put my rook back to f1, and AutumnWind promotes to king. Which can be a little tricky, but because I know the important thing here is that I move my g-pawn out of the way. If my g-pawn is taken, then obviously AutumnWind will only have to take one of them. So king takes f2, and I go for h3, captures h4, and I am back in it. I'm only down 1 game now, 3.5 to 2.5. So there we go, 3.5 to 2.5, and we're moving on to game 7. And AutumnWind, to throw me off once again, goes for c4. And this time I'm like, okay, I'm playing c6, I'm just going to play sound. I don't need to go into any opening because he probably studied this. But we have g3, g6, and the immediate queen a4. And I just go queen b6. I want to think, okay, if there's ever an opportunity for a queen race, maybe I want to do so. But queen takes a7, rook takes a7, and we now have b3. The threat here is if I take, then the a-pawn recaptures, and then my rook has to come down and take every single piece. So I obviously take with the rook first, and now I take on f2 over here. And now I go for b5. b5, we have c takes, and AutumnWind goes for rook to a6. Which I don't find is super necessary because I can just capture with either piece. So I probably would have kept the rook there, but in this game AutumnWind plays rook to a6. I capture with the knight, and we have oh wait, that's b4. We have g4, and here I just play e6, which I actually really like this move. Obviously it opens up for the bishop, as well as if b4 is played, my knight can still capture. This also stops any move like this because I can set up with knight f6 and bishop g7. But anyways, the bishop is given up, and after the knight captures here, I push further with e5, just grabbing more space in the center of the board. Knight takes, and knight to c7, and after the knight takes, I'm pretty sure I actually have a win here, but I mess it up by playing e4, because now after knight takes e6, and I play d6, and the capture here, now I actually have to capture on I have to capture on g4 right here. So capture, oh wait, knight does not capture there. The knight captured on f7, bishop takes e2, knight takes h8, bishop takes f1, and this is all forced, that's why I'm going through it quickly. Knight takes g6, and I finally recapture on h6, obviously I have to. And king takes f1, I play e3, giving up that pawn, and now it's really not looking good for me. So I just develop my knight to e7, AutumnWind does the same to e2, and I start pushing my pawn immediately. We have king g2, and knight to g6, threatening maybe I'm going to lose both my pieces here. But now we have h4, and I capture with the knight first, obviously. And after this we have king to f2, and the only thing I can do is push my pawn, so push the pawn, b4, h2, and the losing move here, it's not losing, but the non-winning move here is e4, because now I can promote to king, and I will be just fine. King takes, and after knight to g1, here we have b5, and I just start marching my king down the board, so king g2, b6, king g3, and after e5, king g4, and e6, this game was agreed to be a draw. So yeah, I think it's possible if he played this out a little longer. I'm really low on time. Maybe he can do something to win. But I won't look too deep into the analysis. We can get this on Kex's study. But I probably would have played this out as white. Maybe you can promote to a rook, bring it down, and then promote to a bishop. But I guess we'll never know what really would have happened. But in any case, we're moving on. Oh, I've got to change the scores. I'm also running out of time. So I hope I don't have to redo this entire recording or split it into two. But this makes it so that if Autumn Wind gets one more win, it's an automatic draw. So I really need to get on my horse here. And I have the white pieces, and I go for e3 once again, and we see another Liardette defense. I play bishop a6, knight takes a6, and I go for queen to f3. I studied this a little bit against Link, and luckily Autumn Wind plays knight b8, which is exactly what Link played. So I know what I'm doing here with b3, and we now have c5 just grabbing space in the center. And I really like this position because after I give away this pawn, I've got d3, which can set for a bunch of captures. And as you can see here, my pieces are fully mobile. I have lots of different options here. And so Autumn Wind plays queen to c7 here. This is a very common move in this position because after knight to c3 you can recapture with the queen, and then there's lots of opportunities. And now I play knight e2. You generally don't want to give up your king in this case. Sorry, in the openings, because you want your king for the endgame. However, in this case it's just sort of nice because my rooks both control the back rank. My knight is developed. And my bishop can develop extremely easily after this pawn is given away. Meanwhile, black's pieces are all stuck on the back rank. So in this case, capturing here isn't what Autumn Wind wants to do. He wants to make a little more chaos. So we have queen takes on c2, and I go for bishop to a3. We now have queen captures on d3 to force me to capture on b4. After queen captures e2, and I capture on e2, we now have... Oh wait, sorry, I do not capture there. My king captures on e2. Obviously, I don't want to lose my king. And we have bishop to a6, which actually loses the game. If you want to try to find the win here after bishop takes and bishop takes, feel free to... Oh, wait, bishop did not recapture. I'm struggling. And bishop takes e2. And after this, if you want to try to find the win here, Autumn Wind obviously thinks I can't sacrifice either of my rooks here. But let's see what happens. After you pause the video and you found these series of moves, g4, and after the take, the important thing is after f3, it forces an extra capture here. So now I can play rook a b1, and after the bishop takes on h1, I've got an extra move, so I can capture here. And after this capture, obviously, I am completely winning now. With a4, definitely want to play h4 first because... if I play e4 first, then maybe the bishop can capture and he can get away with something. So h4 is important. And after rook takes, here we have rook takes on e4, and I'm back in the game. It's now we're now tied at 4 apiece. So if either of us want to win, we have to win 1.5 out of the next 2 games. So we go into game 9, and in these games. When I'm black in these games, I still have not won a game as black in this series, so I'm not feeling great. But I try to throw him off a bit with e3 and c5. And as I found out after the game, he actually had prepped for me to play c5 with this really crazy move of b3. I think at least it was b3 or g3 that he wanted to try out. And this once again just confused me. b5, bishop takes b5, and the correct move here is actually bishop g7, sort of like the suicide defense, but you can play c4, and you've got better moves. So he was just sort of throwing this in to be like, okay, do you know this line? And obviously I didn't, but I play c4, so bishop captures on c4, and I now play g5. We have bishop takes f7, king takes f7, and just developing with knight e2, and I develop with knight h6. We now have e4, grabbing more space in the middle, and I go for d5, which is a blunder, but in this case, I'm just trying to cause chaos. And after g4, I take with the knight on g4, and I'm just trying to cause a lot of panicking. Maybe I can make Autumn Wind get low on time and have this help me. So we have rook f1, and I play knight takes on f2. And after king takes f2, I take on d2 just because it maybe opens up for one of these pieces to come out. And we have knight takes on d2, and I play bishop to e6, which is the losing move in this case. However, Autumn Wind only has a minute and a half. There's about 5 different moves that mate for white, but there's also basically the other 10 lose for white, so it's really impossible to see Plenty of these moves win. I think I can't even mention some of them. It's so crazy how they don't win. In this case, AutumnWind plays king to e3, as you'll see, is a really crazy move, as we find out very soon, because none of us blunder for the rest of the game. So the winner here is it's just crazy. I'm just going to show it. Bishop takes on b3. Rook has to take on f7. You don't want to recapture, because then obviously I can move my bishop somewhere, and then these captures will be game over. So bishop takes on c2. Rook takes on h7. Bishop takes on d1 now, and rook takes on e7. Obviously I want to take there. If I don't take there, then I have to take the rook, and the queen captures. Then I just come down here, and it's lost for me because the queen has no captures to make. But anyways, in this case, I now play rook takes on h2, rook takes on a7, and honestly, don't ask me why, but... Oh wait, yeah, sorry, you can ask me why. I didn't capture the rook here. If rook captures, then it just, I don't know. It looks way nicer with bishop captures on e2. We're both extremely low on time now from trying to calculate this monstrosity. But we now have king takes e2, rook takes a2, and obviously only captures rook takes on a8. Rook takes d2, rook takes b8. And here's the reason why this ends up working out perfectly for me, is after I take on a2 here, if we see rook captures on f8, then obviously I capture the rook, and then the bishop has to take this g5 pawn. In this case, we see rook captures on a2, and now I can just move my bishop away, and this bishop has to come down to this pawn. So it all ended up being that my pawn was on g5, and this bishop had to come down and capture. It was just an absolute mess. And it's crazy to think that back when we look back at this position, king e3 doesn't work because my pawn is here and this bishop is slicing down. It's just crazy to think about. So after bishop g7, bishop captures, and bishop to f6, I win the game. And this puts me at a score of 5. And this is really important because I have now drawn the game for sure. All I need to do is get a draw, and then I can... if I get a draw, then I win the match in general. And I have the white pieces again, and I go for e3 again, and after b6, I play bishop a6, and we go for the same line. Queen f3, knight b8, queen takes, king takes, and b3, c5. We now see b4 once again, c takes b4, d3, queen c7. And after knight c3, we do the exact same thing again, but this time he takes advantage of my bishop to a3 move. Queen takes, bishop takes, queen takes on e2, and after king takes on e2, not playing this losing move again, but instead playing knight to c6, and this is just a really nice centralizing move, developing a piece. Bishop takes, and now it does not look good for me. I just play h4. Because now if I come down and capture here, maybe I have some options here, but AutumnWind finds the brilliant knight b4. So now after my rook captures, knight captures, I have to capture here. He captures back, and after my rook has to capture, my position does not look good. I have very few pieces, and pawns at that, whereas AutumnWind has a bunch of major pieces, so it's not looking good for me. So I just push far ahead, hoping that he makes a mistake. So we have knight e7, and I play e4, just pushing further ahead. Queen e8, just sort of bring the king over here. If I end up promoting, you want to be able to connect these two pawns. And I play e5 now. And the correct move here, and that's a blunder, because if you want to try to find the win for black here, black has a brilliant move. So pause the video. And now that you're back, I'm not going to show you the brilliant move first. I'm just going to first mention that AutumnWind plays rook to h5. But the correct move here is d6. And the reason being, after e takes, bishop takes, and d takes on e7, black actually captures on e2. And this is why it's so difficult to see, is even after f3 or f4, you can just recapture. So say we have f3 and king recaptures after f4. Now white only has one pawn. Black's going to be able to take full advantage of this, and black has probably like a mate in 16 or something like that, and an extremely strong winning position. But in this case, AutumnWND plays rook to h5, g takes, and the problem is now there's nothing to capture here. And sadly, after d6 now and e takes, AutumnWND now plays the completely losing move of g6. And the reason this is losing now, as many of you see, is after I take here and the knight recaptures, this pawn now no longer has to take here, and the knight just ends up staying out here. And so AutumnWND resigned the game, obviously, because I can just play something like f4, d3, and then advance the pawn. So in general, that allows me to get my 6th point and make the comeback and win this match against AutumnWND 6-4. But as you can see, this was an absolutely thrilling match to watch to all the people who watched it live. We probably had 30 plus spectators at one point. It was just incredible to watch. We saw a lot of the Liardet defense, a lot of super off theory stuff today. So I wasn't able to maybe explain to you the main lines and why we're playing certain moves there. But hopefully I did a decent job of explaining all these off theory moves, because wow, it was an exhausting game, a long game, and a really well played game by both sides, with lots of blunders by both sides as well. But in any case, this puts me in a nice position, and this also puts my final match, though, the match that depends whether I skip the elimination round or not, is my next match is put against Pepsi and Gaming, which we will be covering in the next video. But anyways, I really hope you enjoyed this match between AutumnWND and I. Again, AutumnWND, what an amazing player and teacher at that. I highly suggest you follow him and watch some of his games and look at some of his studies, because he's a really well studied and a very strong theoretical player. But other than that, thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. I hope the sound quality was better on this one. And other than that, thank you, and I'll see you around.